How do you safely remove food allergens from surfaces? Well, this depends on a few factors: the type of surface, the texture of food, and lastly, the cleaning materials used. The best practice is to wash surfaces with warm, soapy water and a clean cloth that has not touched any other food proteins to chemically break down and remove the food proteins. With hard surfaces, there are a few methods that will successfully remove the food allergens from these surfaces. For example, countertops. Disinfectant cleaning sprays or wet wipes will kill 99% of germs if you wipe down the surface a few times and scrub it with clean cloths. But make sure the cloth you use is wet, as the dry cloths or even paper towels are just going to move the protein around from one area to another. Pots, pans, and dishes are also something that need to be used with warm soapy water, and make sure that you're really scrubbing with a scrub brush that is not touching the food proteins. Using separate utensils when you cook the food free from allergens is really important, because high heat is not going to destroy all the food proteins. It's also important to keep those scrub brushes separate, because sometimes we may get distracted and pick up the wrong one, or scrape food off of a plate without thinking twice with a contaminated utensil. Pots and pans tend to be used frequently, so to really make sure that you're using soap and water to break down the food proteins is very important. These cleaning practices should be mindful, and maybe labeling them would be helpful for which utensils or scrub brushes to use that shouldn't touch the food proteins. Soap and water, warm water, is a best practice for cleaning the kitchen tools. And if possible, avoid using plastic storage containers for leftovers, for example, because these are a little bit porous and they can absorb the food proteins, and they're not as easily removed because the surfaces are not as dense. So at first glance, look at these pictures, and they really do look like textbook examples of how to properly sanitize surfaces, dishes, hands, right? Or maybe not. Let's take a closer look. When you're thinking about deep cleaning, it's important to really think beyond the surface. When you start to understand that a microscopic amount of an allergenic food protein is all it takes to create a cross-contact threat, then you start to have new eyes in looking at everyday cleaning processes. For example, if you're scrubbing a pan after making an omelet for one person in the household, but there's a different person in your house that has an egg allergy, then even with soap and water, you're putting that person with the allergy at risk. If you're using the same scrubbing utensil, it's going to pick up those food particles of egg. The bristles are not going to stay sanitary. Even after the soap and water will clean the pan. Or how about if you spray down counters with a sanitizing wipe, but then you use that same wipe to wipe down another surface with a food allergen on it? That dishcloth or that wet wipe may still have the food proteins. Or in the case of a peanut, you can't really see it with the eye, but it sticks to counters quite a bit. And that peanut oil really doesn't go away very easily. Wiping out a bowl that contains food allergens is another practice that seems fairly safe if you're just emptying out the bowl, but it's really not good enough. Just because you can't see food proteins doesn't mean they're not there. It needs to be washed with hot or warm soapy water. So these are a couple of examples where we really do need to think beyond the surface and make sure that we are avoiding cross contact inadvertently with our cleaning procedures.